Today I'm going to be watching this video. It's called Why Starbucks Failed in Australia. Now, I can already think of some reasons, having learned a lot about Australia. I mean, first, just Australians have got taste buds, man. Starbucks for me is, I still go to Starbucks now and again, but it's definitely the sort of McDonald's or Burger King, the sort of fast food version of coffee. I think you know what you're getting. You're probably getting a nice environment in there and a nice cafe, but the coffee's pretty standard. And when it comes to Australia, of course, what I've learned is Australian coffee culture is next level. Not just the culture, but the coffee itself. Australians are very proud of their coffee. So tell me what you think. Why did Starbucks fail in Australia? I guess we're going to find out. But yeah, tell me, is it completely failed? Can you still find Starbucks in Australia? Let's watch this and find out, sorry.
Starbucks has coffee shops all over the world. There are more than 28,000 locations in 76 markets, from Shanghai to Guantanamo Bay.
They've got Starbucks in Guantanamo Bay. The location of, I mean, you could say sort of atrocities, just shocking things, but they still have a Starbucks. That's the American capitalism model at its worst, man. All those people committing those things, doing whatever they do to prisoners, and they still need to go and get their like their pumpkin spice latte, man.
And in China, a new Starbucks location opens up every 15 hours. But there is one continent that seems uninterested in the hype over the Seattle-based coffee chain. And that continent is Australia. It's proven to be one of the toughest markets in the world to break into. So tough, in fact, that Starbucks closed more than 2/3 of its stores on the continent back in 2008. So what went so wrong with Starbucks in Australia?
Yeah, I think 2008 was like the financial crisis as well, so maybe that had an effect, but I'm not too sure how big of an effect that had to Australia. I think it affected most countries worldwide, so that could be, maybe it's a coincidence, but that's maybe like one of the reasons as well.
To answer that, let's go back to July of 2000, when Starbucks opened its first Australian shop in Sydney. From there, it expanded fast. By 2008, Starbucks had 87 stores across the continent.
I think one of the problems for Starbucks, and it's true for a lot of businesses that have been successful in one country, is that they thought that their business model could just roll out to a different environment and there was no need for them to adjust.
But that was the problem. It tried to grow the empire too fast. Starbucks rapidly opened up multiple locations instead of slowly integrating them into the Australian market.
When they launched too rapidly and didn't give the Australian consumer an opportunity to really develop an appetite for the Starbucks brand. They also moved into regional areas, into outer suburbs of major cities. And so for the Australian consumer, it was almost like it was too available for them. And so there wasn't this point of difference, this want, this need for Starbucks, and it wasn't an organic growth, which is what we very much saw in the US.
And
that's interesting. Like, you think a company the size of Starbucks would do like a proper analysis of like the desires of the Australian market to see what they actually want, rather than just like thinking, let's just pump out as many cafes or outlets as we can. I think they also they're failing in Vietnam as well for similar reasons, because they have a very they like their Vietnamese coffee. They have their own coffee culture, but it's like, you'd imagine they would be able to think, okay, what do Australians like? Let's tailor this to their tastes. But clearly they were just focused on high growth rather than doing it kind of intelligently, which is again a big oversight for a huge company like Starbucks.
Its first 7 years in Australia, Starbucks accumulated $105 million in losses. By 2007, Starbucks Australia was hanging on by a thread, taking big loans from the US totaling up to $54 million. And in 2008, Starbucks announced it was shutting down 61 stores. But of course, 2008 was a difficult time for businesses due to the financial crisis. Along with the Australia closures, Starbucks also closed 600 underperforming American stores. But even still, such a retreat in Australia was embarrassing for the brand.
When you're shutting down 75 stores, for the Australian consumer, when they did leave the market, or at least a large number of their stores were shut down, they didn't really care.
It's partly because Australians are spoiled for choice when it comes to coffee. Australia's coffee market is one of the biggest in the world. The industry is expected to hit more than $6 billion in total revenue in 2018. They've been immersed in nuances of cafe culture since the mid-1900s. when Italian and Greek immigrants began traveling to the country. The immigrants introduced Australians to espresso. By the 1980s, Australians were fully engulfed in cafe culture.
Yeah, that's what I was going to actually say. I wanted to know more about the origins of the Australian cafe culture or coffee culture because it's so vibrant at the moment. Like, I thought it might be more of a recent thing, like where it's like the last couple of decades you see all these like really nice coffee shops and good coffee, but clearly it's like very ingrained in Australian culture over 100 years, and it makes sense all these Italian immigrants bringing that over and really getting like the best coffee. That's the difference, I think. If you're drinking coffee, you're drinking like two things. You're drinking just coffee, like your espresso, like whatever. Like in Australia, you say like you can get it the long black, flat white and stuff. So it's like if you're just going based on the coffee and the coffee beans, going to all these other smaller coffee shops, you're going to get a better quality of coffee, 100% than Starbucks. The thing that Starbucks maybe can do better or is like kind of more known for, especially here in Malaysia, is like those more novelty ones, like the pumpkin spice latte and the sort of autumn time, the Christmas coffees. I'll probably go for like those like mint frappuccino type things and all that. But drinking normal coffee, are obviously most of the time just going to go to a normal coffee shop, especially somewhere with great coffee shops like Australia.
They've also grown accustomed to specialty menu items, like a flat white or an Australian macchiato.
So cafes in Australia were born out of like the Italian culture of, meeting a friend and knowing your local barista, and it being kind of like a local meeting place where everyone knew each other, and that coffee was just a part of that. And then Starbucks came in with what is more of an American style like coffee culture, which is essentially just like coffee is a product, coffee is a commodity, coffee is like to perk me up in the morning. It's caffeination.
Starbucks had a basic menu and offered more sugary drinks, which most Australians didn't like.
In Australia, where local tastes are different, so we don't really want a coffee that's hundreds of ounces with lots of sugar in it. We want something a bit more sophisticated.
Plus,
Yeah, I guess that's true actually, because obviously knowing Australia, the difference between Australia and America when it comes to things like diet, Australia definitely is known for being more healthy living and just taking a bit more care with like food and cuisine and stuff like that, being more healthy. So if the things that Starbucks do well are these sugary coffees and Australians just don't like them, then again you sort of think like then Starbucks need to think, okay, we just do less of them and focus more on maybe getting like the best coffee beans and promoting that side of the business rather than just doing what they do in every other country.
Starbucks charge more than local cafes. So Australians instead opted to pay less for coffee they liked from a local barista they trusted.
And so when you come in with this big like, hey, we're going to open all these cafes and they're all going to be to-go focused, it just was the complete wrong market for what the Australian was used to.
But there's one American coffee company that's thriving in Australia. Founded in Chicago and now based in Australia, Gloria Jean's got the traction in Australia that Starbucks couldn't. Gloria Jean's has more than 400 Australian locations and serves more than 35 million consumers in Australia each year. So what is Gloria Jean's doing in Australia that Starbucks isn't? Well, the company attributes its success to two Australians who franchised the business in their home country. Shops started to show up in Australia in 1996. Fast forward to today, the company has a presence in every Australian state. The reason? Its menu. The chain offers a wide variety of espresso drinks and specialty coffee. Failing to adapt its menu to Australians' coffee culture proved to be a mistake for Starbucks. And the company faces another challenge later this year: Italy. Starbucks is opening its first store in Milan in late 2018. Home of the espresso, Italy is rich in cafe culture. But according to Starbucks, it's not going to make the same mistakes that it did in Australia. The company said that it would develop in Italy with humility and respect for its coffee culture. It announced it would be opening a roastery, which is not your average cafe. It gives customers a chance to see coffee beans roasted and processed before their eyes. So there's a chance that it won't struggle like it did in Australia. But Starbucks isn't admitting defeat in Australia either. Starbucks is staging a comeback on the continent. In 2014, Starbucks locations in Australia were purchased by the Mount Waverley-based Withers Group. Starbucks told CNBC that since its sale to the Withers Group, the company learned a lot. So this time, it's taken a different approach to putting Starbucks on the continent.
So if you just think about it, Australia is a big tourism destination. There's a lot of US and Chinese tourists, Starbucks have been very successful in China, and it makes a lot of sense for them to build out because there are people looking for something that's familiar to them.
Now with 39 locations in Brisbane, Melbourne, the Gold Coast, and Sydney areas, this time it's not looking to appeal to Australians. But instead, the coffee giant hopes to be a familiar face for tourists visiting popular vacation destinations in Australia.
Australia's always been a high volume tourist market. The same thing in terms of international students at our universities, potential opportunities for them. And we're starting to see Starbucks enter into some large shopping malls here in Australia as well.
Australia welcomed 9 million tourists from 2017 to 2018, and those international visitors spent more than $30 billion in 2017 alone. So tourists could possibly be the key to keeping the company afloat and preventing another downfall.
Yeah, that was interesting. It's like interesting that they're really not admitting defeat. They're not going back and saying, let's focus on the Australians, focus on Australians in Australia and try and change the way we promote, like doing something similar to what they're doing in Italy, making it a bit more authentic and showing like the coffee beans and getting better quality. They're like, rather than focus on the Australians, we're actually just going to focus on the tourists to Australia. That's a bit of a kick in the teeth to Australians, man. Like, but maybe Starbucks is just too far gone and people just would never change in Australia. Tell me what you think. Would you go if Starbucks changed the way they sort of market themselves in Australia, made it like a better experience and use better quality coffee and focus more on the espresso side of things? Would you start going, or would you always just stick with the sort of more independent local coffee shops and baristas and things like that? Interesting documentary. It was interesting, just to hear about that sort of failure story for Starbucks in Australia. Tell me what you think about it. Thanks.